Well, it takes a lot of good people behind the scenes to make the kind of strides that President Trump did on religious freedom and so many other important issues. Jennie Lichter was the Deputy Director of the Domestic Policy Council and the Deputy Assistant to the President. And she was there to oversee the administration's progress on the issue of religious freedom and so many other issues. Jennie led efforts across the White House and the federal government on religious liberty, faith-based partnerships, and the dignity of human life. She has a resume that spans the Office of Legal Policy, the Archdiocese of Washington, the District of Columbia Court, and most impressively, of course, FRC, where she worked as a research assistant in the early 2000s. Jennie, welcome back to your old stomping grounds here at FRC.
Thank you, Tony. I love every opportunity to be with you in FRC.
Well, as you heard us talking with Reince, just an amazing job what the Trump team did with the encouragement of the president on so many issues. I want to play, before we get started, I want to play a clip of President Trump at the National Prayer Breakfast in 2020.
In everything we do, we are creating a culture that protects freedom and that includes religious freedom. In America, we don't punish prayer. We don't tear down crosses. We don't ban symbols of faith. We don't muzzle preachers. We don't muzzle pastors. In America, we celebrate faith. We cherish religion.
Those weren't just words. That is really what the administration did.
So remarkable and historic about what President Trump and his team did is that those words that you just shared weren't just words. They translated into action, and a lot of action, and a lot of strategic and comprehensive action. And I think that's never been done before by any president, Democrat or Republican. So this administration, the prior administration, in other words, worked really hard and deliberately to defend religious freedom for individuals, as well as for houses of worship and faith communities, domestically and internationally, for people of all faith traditions. And we tried to do that using every tool available to the federal government, which is executive action. President Trump loved using executive action, as every president probably does, and he used it to good effect. Signed an executive order on the first 3 national days of prayer of his administration, and then many in between that touched on religious liberty. We used the presidential bully pulpit, the president's own voice, which, as you said, he was eager to use to support religious freedom and people of faith. We used regulations out of almost every agency, the litigation positions taken by the Justice Department and other federal agencies, funding, the way that grants were distributed, and parameters that we put in place for different government funding programs to make sure that religious entities could come to the table and compete for federal money. And even the federal government in its role as employer, we tried to make improvements there too, to make sure that people of faith could access time off for religious observances. So again, this was a comprehensive, whole of government, dedicated, proactive, strategic effort to protect, defend, and raise up our first freedom that I don't think has ever been seen before, but that I hope we see again, because I think President Trump set the bar high for future presidents, but I think he also showed what can be done when you build a team and set a tone, that this is an absolute priority for the president.
I think that is absolutely correct. I do think he has set the bar of expectations, and I hope it was not the last, but just the first of many presidents who will work to advance these fundamental values. I want to underscore something, because you said something, this is like the first administration, no other administration like that. And I would agree, from the ones that I've worked with over the last 20 years, that this administration wasn't checking boxes. And I want you to talk about that, because as I interacted with the White House and you and your colleagues, there was I would say an atmosphere in the administration. The president said, this is what we want, now go do it. It wasn't just checking the box to say, well, we gave something to the religious community, we gave something to this community. It was really defining of what the administration was all about.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that started with President Trump, again, as we talked about a little bit a few minutes ago. And You would ask Reince, was he surprised that this billionaire from Manhattan, who didn't have a reputation previously as being, terribly religious person, turned out to be the greatest champion the faith community had seen in the presidential, in the Oval Office. And I was able to understand a little bit over the course of working for President Trump where that came from. It was clear from the beginning that it was genuine, that he absolutely meant it, and those were his marching orders to his team. This is a priority for us, work hard on it. But he reflected once or twice in sort of smaller settings about different times that religion had touched him personally. He very much appreciated being prayed over, and I'm sure you had a lot of opportunities to see that, Tony. He welcomed prayers from the American people, from the pastors that he worked with, and from his staff. He mentioned once the impact he saw in his neighborhood growing up in New York City of the Catholic Church around the corner from his childhood home. He wasn't a Catholic, obviously isn't a Catholic, but saw, it seems, through that lens, the importance that a faith-based institution, a house of worship, can have on an entire neighborhood. And that also formed him. And then he staffed his administration with people of faith to whom this wasn't just box checking, but for whom it was very, very personal. And that was one of the great joys of the administration for me, to have so many colleagues who were willing to go above and beyond, to work extra hours, to take on additional projects, to work together to try and promote and defend our first freedom, and to pray together along the way, and to ask for and welcome the prayers of folks who we met with and worked with, and all the American people who we knew were lifting us up in prayer. That was so important to us as well, and we felt it. And I hope the American people saw that, and that their prayers were effective, and that we were working so hard for them and for people of faith. And I hope, as we've said, that what we were able to accomplish, although much of it will inevitably be dismantled in the next few years, will live on, both in kind of the example that it's set and some of the good things that we did that hopefully will stay on the books.
I think when people look at all the accomplishments, and by the way, folks, that you can find that at the website, you can look at the accomplishments of the Trump administration, and you can look at Biden's actions side by side. It's at the website, prayvotestand.org. But Jennie, I think when you look at all that the president accomplished, there's no wonder there was opposition, because these are not just policy, political things. A lot of these were changing the spiritual and the cultural atmosphere of our nation. And there's a lot of people that are now cynical. They're frustrated over what happened in the last election. They're cynical about politicians. You heard Reince speak to this, but I would like, from your perspective as well, just to speak to the Christians out there that are wondering the way forward. What should they be doing right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, I love the title of your program, because I think it's exactly right, and I think the order is exactly right. I mean, prayer is the number one thing, right? Pray for our country, pray for this president, pray for the faith community, and that we can all continue to have strength and to keep our eyes on our primary mission of evangelizing the world, right? Come what may in the political realm. The mission that Christ gave the church doesn't change, depending on whether you have tax-exempt status as a church entity or you don't, right? So I think our mission is clear, and that mission needs to continue in the realm of prayer and faith and the work of the church writ large. Politically, vote yes, stand yes, and remember your rights and assert your rights. And one of the things that we hope we accomplished during the Trump administration was reminding the American people of our great inheritance of religious freedom in this country, and that is something that belongs to the American people. It's enshrined in the Constitution, and no politician can just take that away. And it's very important for people to continue to confidently assert those rights. And some of what we did was very deliberately aimed at reminding and sort of handing the American people the weapon of knowledge and confidence in their rights. Like, for example, we republished a guidance document on Religious Freedom Day 2020 in January 2020, published a document out of the Education Department on the constitutionally protected right to prayer and other religious observance in public schools, right? The president held an event in the Oval Office with a bunch of kids who had been discriminated against or punished or scolded by their public schools because they wanted to convene a prayer group, or a little boy because he had ashes on his forehead on Ash Wednesday, or a young Muslim woman because she had asked the school to help her find a place to pray during the day, as her religious tradition required her to do. So often, children or parents or teachers in the public school setting are told that they don't have the right to observe their faith. That's not true. And it had been a while since the President of the United States had used his bully pulpit, and the federal government had spoken clearly through a document out of a federal agency, telling the American people, you don't lose your free exercise right when you walk in the door of your public school. It stays with you. The Constitution is clear about that, and the courts have been clear about that. And when someone tells you you don't have that right, you push back. And that's something I would just really encourage people to do with the confidence born of faith and of knowing your inheritance as Americans.
Well, Jennie, I want to say thank you for not only joining us here tonight, but thank you for the role that you played and the accomplishments that we saw in the last 4 years to advance the sanctity of human life, to advance religious freedom, and the role of believers in our society.
Thanks for your partnership, Tony. Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks so much for being with us. And folks, I want to encourage you again, look at these accomplishments and look at the actions of the Biden administration. You say, why are you doing this? Why are you looking back on the Trump accomplishments? That's 4 years ago. Because it is what's possible when we're involved in the process. It's going to be so easy to get discouraged when we look at the headlines and we look at what the Biden administration is doing, pushing all of this leftist agenda all the way down to our elementary schools and preschools. We have to pray, we have to vote when we have that opportunity, but we have to continue to stand for truth, because as Jennie said, the previous administration showed what was possible. It can be done again, but we have to pray, we have to vote, and we have to stand.